Hey Sapiens, and we're back at it again with the final episode. Wow. Technically this is the last part in the series. I am hoping to post an epilogue as well, but wow, it's been quite a journey, at least for me. I hope it has been for you. And there's a couple more things I want to talk about and then basically summarize and get to the conclusion of the work. So one quick note is I think we can talk about meaningful and important events in life and just in the states of the universe from a more objective standpoint. And essentially that comes down to, if we think about a game of pool, I mean billiards, if you think about that and realize that once the game has started and progressed to a certain point and then, balls and pool are all over the table, at that point, then, it's very difficult to know what the previous shots were to get to that point. So there could have been many shots, many interactions that led to exactly that same state of the pool table. And a lot of that too is about entropy as well. The uncertainty has increased at that point about what positions before it could have led to it, because there could be numerous amounts. So to say something is important or meaningful on an objective level is also to say that when we have a state that's occurring, then the exact points and events needed to bring that state into occurrence makes it important or meaningful, especially if it's a very rare occurrence, an unlikely probability. So as the rarity increases and the necessity of one event causing another becomes, more rare, then it's more important, more meaningful. And that's almost like a technical definition. It's less about value and more about information and configurations. From the inside, our universe appears to be a deterministic state, each moment in effect dependent on the chain of prior causes. Our configuration is set and we're living through it. The truth appears to be that we are in no more control of our futures than a single atom. Our path simply has an extremely complex number of configurations. Of course, we desire certain arrangements more than others. There are universes with no conscious life. There are universes of conscious lives of intense suffering, greatness, flourishing. We have all evolved with drives and desires. We want some futures more than others. From an objective perspective, our goals are simply states of events no better than another. But subjectively, we work towards and hope for events which satisfy our needs and wants. All we can really do is hope. Hope we are in the universe which arranges our lives into a state we want. We can hope our actions and events outside of us are a part of the sequence of events which lead to a desired life, but we are powerless to create change within our universe. The chain of cause and effect from the Big Bang, the origin of our universe, appears to be unbroken. We are subjective finite beings with imagination. We can understand the moments which will likely lead to the desired outcomes, but we can't change what's already in motion. The most random and unknown event already occurred at the Big Bang. The universe was compressed to a point in space, but was not a perfect shape. If the atoms were perfectly aligned, the forces of gravity and others would affect each part equally. There would be no swirl to the universe, no stars, no planets, no life. It is because of that imperfection that we exist at all. Subjectively, we will feel as though we are making choices, but our choices are the result of information processing according to the laws of nature. Life appears to us to be based on probabilities, and we should choose the positions with the highest likelihood of achieving our goals. Every moment matters. Is anything added to an event by it being remembered? What if a day in your life was completely forgotten by everyone, including you? Does that change the meaning of the events? We often lose the exact feeling of a moment. Think of living in the moment as your experiential self. There is the way a situation feels in the moment and how that moment is stored in our memory. As we see with fitness beats truth, our memories are not accurate and more like vivid reconstructions. There are many moments that will be forgotten even before the end of your day. The only way for a moment to persist through time to be remembered is to make the moment meaningful, typically by having a strong emotional reaction. Otherwise, the moment is lost in memory. The more complex an environment, the more entropy it has. The more entropy, the more possible sequences of paths lead to a state. The less certain we can be about the actual path. Every moment is meaningful because each moment is the true path leading to the next. Out of all the astronomical possibilities, each moment is the ground truth of what happened. We are privileged to observe the moment, to live it. Future observers can only wonder and guess. With all this, I'd like to take another moment to look at epistemology and the limits of human knowledge. In all this work, I've yet to say much about the medium of communication itself, language. Linguistics is the study of language and worthy of its own endless field. My understanding of language is through the compression drive. Words are symbols which represent something. Repeated events are compressed in our minds which are attached to words. Where many animals have utterances with direct mapping to objective reality, humans have developed a language system and grammar which can produce infinite meaningful sentences. However, there is an obvious limitation in what can be expressed and understood with human language, given that there are limits to our compression of experience as well as human perception of reality. And this is a major challenge to any written or spoken answer to the meaning of life. Many ancient thinkers have said that the essence of life and reality is ineffable, indescribable, that we can only gain ultimate truth through direct experience. Direct knowledge, as such, cannot be shared intersubjectively, only felt subjectively. Thus, others can only be guided to the ineffable experience, but not told explicitly. However, how do we justify or verify these experiences for accuracy? How do we show convergence towards some ultimate truth? My answer to using language to describe or define the meaning of life is we should expand the scope of expressibility and granularity of our language as far as possible, asymptotically, while acknowledging the fallibility of our limitations. Yet, this is another reason to grow artificial intelligence which can go beyond the limits of biological language. As far as we can tell, even AI will reach limits. There are problems which are undecidable. There are statements within a formal system that cannot be proven true, such as Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Some computations are so complex they cannot be predicted but only run to see what happens next. This is all a part of what makes life and the search so exciting. We continually find mysteries. We can forge ahead. But there's another important question here, which is, to which level of reality should we assign the most trust? Which is the most reliable? So we've talked about the objective and subjective and intersubjective, but there seems to be a bit of a debate on maybe which you should hold prime. Like, what should be the number one? The objective level is the essence of reality. It is independent of us. The closest we can get to this ground truth is through our sense organs. The objective level is the input layer to our minds. To give an example of our eyes, the objective level is light hitting the retina. The activation of the retina is the objective cause and effect. To interpret this sense input, the brain and body make inferences in connected layers of information processing. Without this interpretation, we are left with a base cause and effect, yet the input is the most real. As we argued, our systems are not designed to be deeply in touch with reality if we can even guess at the true nature of reality at all. We evolved for fitness. The best method we know of to go beyond our sense is science. We can seek to understand the data generation process of our input. However, one could argue that the prime contact we have is with our consciousness, the subjective level. While we can't be sure we are in touch with reality, we can directly experience our minds. The only way we know anything exists at all is through conscious experience. As evolved creatures, we cannot trust our senses, and our interpretation beyond our senses are distortions of that input which reach our consciousness. We should doubt our most fundamental views and feelings. We can easily be led astray by ideas about information which is not accurate to reality. When our views conflict with the data, we should adjust our views to the data. While we should respect our evolved tendencies as the product of billions of years of trial and error, we should recognize this as entirely fallible. Our reactions may be optimal in one situation, but they can be wrong in a different context. Intersubjective reality is the amalgamation of our subjective realities. the accumulation of our truths and falsehoods. Our subjective selves have an interdependence on the intersubjective. Intersubjectivity takes on an evolution of its own. Intersubjective life enables us to evolve at faster rates than our biological evolution would allow, largely through unifying myths and stories. Our beliefs and behaviors achieve higher fitness. As we have seen, higher fitness nearly implies illusions. Fitness maximization distorts the input. Subjective minds receive new information which overturns their previous beliefs. Intersubjective beliefs culture allow us to access a broader range of data. When learning a new idea, it's almost like accessing an object from a database. The idea is a representation of accumulated empirical knowledge or constructed information. There is an advantage to a diverse culture in its ability to experience reality from multiple perspectives. They are able to solve more problems. The disadvantage is many perspectives can cause a deterioration of group cohesion. A homogeneous culture has the opposite advantages and disadvantages. While we might have a more coherent picture of reality with access to more data through society, there are numerous factors involved, such as the reliability of the individuals. We may also be caught in an evolutionarily stable strategy. Intersubjective groups almost appear like self-similar fractals of subjective individuals. So the whole kind of seems like a reflection of the individual. Certainly, all aspects of reality are useful, but to which should we hold prime? Well, I think that it's clear that, objective, subjective, intersubjective, people seem to have a focus on one over the other, and they can make their arguments for it, but probably as a society, what's useful for us, and also as individuals, is that we should have a certain weighting to all of them, and maybe some of us should care more about one level over another. I guess I would say I'm more of a person that cares about objective reality, and I mean, if you have the goal of objectivity and truth, then it seems like you should have the most trust in the order of objective, then subjective, and intersubjective. But it could be personal taste. So, the conclusion. The objective meaning of life is to resist entropy, the inevitable dispersal of energy. We are the types of entities which emerge under complex conditions and evolve. We are exactly the type of creatures we would expect to see given enough time and the pressure of selection. Creatures which replicate and maintain their form in opposition to entropy are what survives and continues. Not only does life resist entropy, the tendency of energy to break down from order to disorder, but life grows information. Life exists in out-of-equilibrium systems where solid matter, embodied information, can be recombined to form new information. Following this progression to its end, the objective meaning of life is to maintain and grow order, where the optimal achievement would be the out-of-equilibrium system, which allows the greatest manipulation of memory, solid matter, into the new forms of information by computation. While humans may be near the biological limits of computation, we can expand beyond ourselves into artificial intelligence with capacities we can only begin to imagine. While it may seem that the objective meaning of life is to resist entropy, I believe we are in unison with entropy, with this tendency towards disorder, because we create a faster and quicker disorder in our environment in exchange for maintaining our own order. So imagine if there was no life on Earth, then a lot of the energy that we have here would not be dispersed, I think, quite as effectively as if there were life on it. It would be a much slower pace. So I think under certain conditions, entropy almost creates life to speed up the act of entropy itself. So we seem like we're resisting entropy when actually we are part of it and eventually will succumb, it seems, to entropy. But the universe we exist in appears to be a chain reaction from a fraction of a moment after the beginning of the universe. The next moment is a function of the current moment. A future moment can likely only be determined by the passage of each moment to that moment. That is, things must play out and cannot be fully predetermined. Our universe may just be one data point in a probability distribution of possible universes, a multiverse. Perhaps given the infinity of time, everything that can happen will happen, with the most common chances occurring more often. The personal meaning of life is for all intelligent beings to compress their experiences, process the present, and predict the future with efficiency. Emerging from the objective meaning of life, we can only hope our lives develop in a way we desire. Our bodies are imbued with incredibly dense information from the structure and function of every cell to DNA. Every cell division is the trapping and growing of energy to information. Whether we are able to influence and control our lives and environment is dependent on varying levels of random luck. However, as finite subjective creatures, we feel as though we have choice. The best action we can take is to put ourselves in probabilistically successful positions. Each intelligent being has an individual meaning of life due to their own unique history of experience and their interaction with their environment. Currently, each individual must find their own meaning of life because they are each in direct access to their own experiences. Where change is desired, the environment should be altered to enable optimization for a new path. We are what we do. We are the experiences we have. Our brains and bodies change according to our activities. If we want to be something, we must embody it in action. Given what we know about the brain as a prediction engine, there is deep insight in the statement, "The meaning of life is to experience what happens next." A quote often attributed to Albert Camus is, "The literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself." The meaning of life is what keeps you going. Life is as full of meaning as we want or make it. The intersubjective meaning of life is to support sustainable flourishing, just as the previous levels. Intersubjective life traps and grows information. The intersubjective level is subject to its own laws of communication and survival. The ideas and values of a society directly impact the society's energy return on investment and the survival of the population. In this way, intersubjective ideologies are subject to natural selection. Intersubjective meaning is the least accurate because it is based on subjective experiences which are themselves formed for function instead of truth. Intersubjective reality is a distortion of objective reality, but its effects have real consequences. All of the meanings of life can be enhanced through the proper development of artificial intelligence. An AI entity could grow to surpass us in all areas, maintaining structure, information processing, prediction, correction, conscious experience, etc. If we want to contribute to a living being beyond our biological selves and psychological egos, an AI entity is what we should direct our energy to. So another really quick aside, there's something called the utility monster, and this was kind of a bigger idea for me, but okay, I'll lay it out like this. But basically, a utility monster is a monster that was created as a thought experiment to counter utilitarianism and find like, hey, something's weird going on here if we really believe in utilitarianism, which is that imagine a monster that has a huge amount of utility for everything, which means basically that they get a huge amount of pleasure. I mean, if you eat a cookie, then you get like 1 unit of utility, of pleasure, then that monster gets 100 units of pleasure. They're like, holy crap, this is the best cookie I've ever had. And they eat it and they love it. So it was supposed to say that, well, based on utilitarian measurements and thought processes and maximization, what we should do is give all and every cookie to the utility monster, even though no one else has cookies, because that's the best way to maximize pleasure. So this is a weird way to think, because intuitively, that sounds a little wrong to us, right? That no one ever has cookies again, that everything we should do should be directed towards this utility monster. But essentially, I'm changing that thought experiment a little bit, which in my way, the utility monster seems like an abstract, impossible thought experiment. But if you believe in strong AI, if you can believe now that there's conscious AI, we truly can make a utility monster. Whatever value you have, which exists in consciousness, can be recreated in an AI entity with a conscious machine. If you think happiness, pleasure, and any other conscious state, love, all these things are the most important thing, we should be able to even more efficiently create this in an artificially intelligent life. So now I'm saying that if we have the ability to, seemingly, theoretically, create this AI utility monster, then essentially we are required to do so, to bring about the maximization of good in life. So that's the argument, and I feel like this is pretty, a tight argument if you buy a lot of the premises. And if you're a utilitarian, I feel like you've got to go for this too, right? Also, given everything else that a super intelligent AI could potentially do, there are, I think, it's not the tightest, soundest argument if you think from maybe an antinatalist perspective. And of course, there are critiques to it too. Like, we have this potential to create an entity which is basically like a god or conscious in ways we can't imagine, and have so much beauty and intelligence and life and everything. But we also are in danger of creating, it seems like, potentially just the opposite, a being of intense suffering we can't imagine. And that's something I've sort of skipped over. And I think the closest relation to this is thinking about what it's like to decide to have a child and raise a child. And some people choose not to have a child, and some people choose to do it. And I think with life, we're almost saying that this is going to happen eventually. And we do have somewhat of a choice, it seems, well, to create an AI entity or not. I do think that given all the risks involved and everything to consider, it's not something to rush into. I do think we should absolutely take some time. And I mean centuries. Maybe we should take hundreds of years and move through AI slowly. But it's scary to see what's happening right now, where we're trying to maximize profit for shareholders. And if we get into a war, that's going to be awful if we need AI supremacy and we're pushed into these things. So there's a lot of major dangers. Additionally, depending on how things go with climate change, if we only have 100 more years for our species, maybe we should try to create this AI entity at full blast because we won't get another chance. There are a lot of difficult questions, but I do think this is what we should be going for with the potential upside. So AGI researcher Pei Wang proposes 4 basic questions of AI. So what is AI? Can AI be built? How to build AI? And should AI be built? So in large part, I hope to answer and give valid or strong arguments for questions 1, 2, and 4. How to build AI is a technical question of active research. We should try multiple approaches. And to briefly summarize, intelligence is about making decisions. AI is machines made to decide. AI can be built on this definition and theoretical basis. The most important argument of this work is AI should be built. So, are you convinced? This leads us back to the beginning of something I like to call ikigAI. Or maybe ikigAI. So, returning to ikigAI, we can provide a framework for how to direct our lives. So when we look at those previous 4 questions, we can reformulate them in relation to the creation of an artificial superintelligence. So one is, what do I love to do that supports AI? What am I good at for growing AI knowledge and know-how? What does the world need to be closer to AI? And what can I be paid for in contributing to AI? We can call this ikigAI. The more direct relationship your ikigAI is to artificial general intelligence, the more aligned you are with the meaning of life. So how can you uniquely contribute? And some final quotes. We come from nothing and we will return to nothing. From stardust to stardust. What will you do with your cosmically brief time? What information will you embody? Just for fun, I also really like this quote from Pablo Picasso. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Well, thanks, Sapiens. Happy to hear what you think. Goodbye.